What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle. Very excited here to be doing the Abomination guide, the very new character that we're getting on the 27th if you decide to purchase the DLC. In this video, we'll talk about his strengths, his weaknesses, how you play the character, go over the skills, some starter teams, and the trinkets to help get you rolling. As always, if you enjoy the content, make sure to give it a thumbs up, leave your thoughts below in the comments, and subscribe for more, and then check out the links in the description box to be a part of the community. For strengths, what is Abomination good at? He is a very durable character. His HP only being 40 max isn't the highest, but he has ways to heal himself, so he can always stay in the fight and hopefully at full power. He also does a very good job managing his own stress. We'll talk about that later. And he's very flexible in terms of damage. He can do some setting up, facilitating with the chains, little damage over time, and then when you transform, it's a lot of big on-hit burst damage. For weaknesses, Abomination has a weakness of stress, but it's actually not Abomination himself. Much like the first game, he does a very good job managing his own stress, even though he does have to sink extra turns into it here and there. The issue is if you're transforming a lot, once or twice a fight, then he might start racking up stress on the rest of the team over time. So you have to make sure that you have a reliable way to keep everyone in safe ranges. The second major weakness is that a lot of his skills are conditional. He wants combo when he's in human form, and he can also kind of set it up himself if he needs to. And when he transforms, he wants a lot of different weird effects on the skills. Like, we'll talk about that, of course, in a minute here, but for instance, Rake from the first game makes a return, and it's the same thing. When you commit to hitting Rake, you kind of want to do it every single turn so you keep the damage buff. For Rage is another one. If they have block, he does way less damage. If they have Vuln, he does way more damage. And that's before we're even getting into his paths, which also have a lot of conditions. So it can be a little tough setting up his situations because there's a couple hoops here and there, so it's going to test your team building. His final major weakness is that he is slow. In the first game, his base speed was very, very high. He was a fast character, even in human form. In this game, his base speed is 3. When he transforms, he gets a bonus 3. But if he's not transformed, 3 is kind of slow. And even transform 6 is fast, but it's not like the fastest. You know, it's not the 7-speed grave robbers. It's not speed tokens, nothing like that. So he's fast enough in beast form, but in human, not the fastest. When trying to play Abomination, there are a few things to keep in mind. Looking at his skills, he can pick 4 out of 5 of his human skills and then 4 out of 5 of his beast skills. So it's really hard to pick a set that doesn't work. However, when you are picking the skills that you're using and you're building the team, you have to decide when he's doing utility, what utility he's providing, and if he's doing damage, when is he doing damage, and what damage is he doing, because he has 2 different modes to go into and different things to do when he's either human or transformed. Any team with Abomination should have at least 1 stress healer, ideally some kind of off stress healer or access to items as you're going through the run, like laudanum. As I said, the stress on himself, Abomination, does not matter because he can manage it pretty well. But consistent transforming, especially multiple times in a fight, especially when transform is not mastered, then it's going to start racking up on the rest of the team. So you have to be aware of that. That point ties into the third point we're going to make here, and that is deciding when to transform. If you really want to, you can just slam it turn 1 every time. That's totally fine. It can work, and, you know, obviously do what you want to. But if you want to get the most out of Abomination, make sure that you know when you should be staying in human form, when to go back to human form, and when to transform. The good rule of thumb from Darkest Dungeon 1 that makes a return this time is transforming is usually based upon either a dedicated plan, like you have something set up that you're trying to do, or it's a panic type of situation where you need burst damage now that you weren't expecting to need, so you hit the transform. Now it's time to go over Abomination's skills. As mentioned before, he has 5 human form skills and 5 beast skills, and his 11th skill, because everyone has 11 in this game, is to transform. Transform is a skill you can never take off. As you can see here, you can't unclick this, he always has to have it. And you can't pick 5 human skills and then like 3 beast skills. It doesn't work that way. So you have to, at max, pick 4 of each, which means you're only usually leaving out one thing, and that depends on your build, what you're doing, and what you actually want. So make sure you're picking everything, and just be aware of that. And you can tell here the human skills are the normal outline with the yellow, and then the transform skills are the chained up pictures right here. First, we'll talk about transforms, since this is the most important thing to the character. It's fun watching people speculate if he's going to get it by hitting Death's Door, or if when he hits 10 stress, he has a chance to transform. No, it's very simple. You press the button, and that's it. It has a cooldown instead of a use limit like it did in the first game, so you can actually, if the fight goes a long time, you can keep hitting it, which is pretty cool. It doesn't end your turn, so when you transform to or from beast form, you still get an extra turn. You can get all these buffs that you get from switching, and you can still do something. Very common thing to do with Abomination is to transform back to human and then hit Absolution immediately, so you can heal, like right here, if it's mastered, like both are mastered, it's 5 stress, right? That's a lot. 1 turn, 5 stress off the character. Very strong. So when he goes into beast form, he gets bonus speed, and that's where he gets, a lot of his offensive power. And when he transforms and is mastered, he gets strength. Manacles makes their turn from the first game and is not a stun bot move anymore. It is very similar to Occultist Demon Pull, where you pull them from the back up to the front and they get comboed. So it shares those things. Occultist can stun with 2 unchecked power tokens. However, Manacles, and we're starting to see more of this, because in older videos I've talked about how crit, which is the little spiky token there, and riposte, so crit here and riposte here, these are the 2 hardest tokens to counter. Like, nothing inverts them, and so you have to use special skills to pull them off. We're starting to see more of that. And so Abomination can get rid of it with Manacles. It's not a common token, but that's not the only thing Manacles is doing, so it's okay to have it on and just hit people, and if you see crit, then you can just yank it off. It also combos them, does some okay damage, and when it's upgraded, removes strength. So a lot of utility, and it can hit rank 2. So that's really nice. Backlash. This is a new move. He can kind of tank with this, because it knocks them back. If they're comboed, it can stun on upgrade, and it gives him block, and the damage is pretty not, it's not the business. So this is just kind of a filler move. His human form doesn't put out a lot of damage, which I'm very glad, because before he had such a monstrous base stat that Manacles still hit for like 10 damage, and that was, a good amount in the first game. So not quite the same in this. So Backlash just knocks people around, Manacles pulls people around, he's very disruptive, and he gets blocked when he's doing this, so pretty cool. V-Spile. Removes corpses. This does not remove, or at least the unmastered version. It clears whatever corpse it hits. It doesn't clear everything. That's why the upgraded version says target team clear corpse. So if you want an entire, team-wide wipe, like Magnesium Rain, you won't get that until you put the point in. Same restrictive ranks too as the first game. He has to be in the middle. He can only hit the middle, which not the worst targeting in this game. In the first game was a little awkward. This game, bit better. Iker. He just spits on him, and he applies some decent blight. He can hit everything. It's like poison darts without the on-hit damage. And yeah, the move's not bad. I would argue it's his weakest human form move, though, just because there's no on-hit damage, and the crit rate's not super high. And when it's not upgraded, Orb Blight's a pretty good hit. It's half of Plague Grenade. Should tell you something there. At least upgraded Plague Grenade, and it's regular Noxious Blast, so it's got the good targeting, so I guess that's okay. Got the Res Pierce on combo, which isn't the most desirable use of a combo token, and the upgraded version, adjacent enemies get comboed when you hit a target that has combo. So you can kind of spread combo on the team, which can help some characters like Bounty Hunter, especially in Kingdoms where he's permanent, and Leper is always going to have targets. Just a lot of combo floating around, so it's a weird utility move. It's not my personal favorite, and I guess the thing you might want to do is to use some kind of combo setup move, hit someone in the middle. Like, you can manacle someone in the middle and then hit Iker, or someone else can set you up and then you can Iker and just splash it on the team. So that's your option there. Absolution coming back, much like Leper's Solemnity. In the first game, Solemnity healed more HP but less stress, and Absolution was the same skill where it healed two things, but it healed less HP and way more stress. Now they're very comparable, right? So heal a third and 2 stress with the cooldown and all that, and then Leper with Solemnity as... Honestly, Leper just needs a rework, dude. This is... Yeah, Absolution just kind of blows this away. It's got the cooldown, but like, you don't usually need to use these back to back. So, the Leper is a tank, but that's getting into the weeds of all that. The first beast skill is the return of a classic Rake. This has been the same, or this is the same as it has been, where it hits the front 2 enemies, and you can use it from the same positions. And what happens is that it ramps up its own damage the more that you use it. So with Rake, it's kind of one of those things that if you decide to hit it, then you're committing to hitting it for like 3 turns, because otherwise you're kind of wasting the effectiveness. And since this ramps up a lot of damage and some crit on the upgrade, it's honestly just really good at that. And there are some fights, historically Shambler, because Shambler summons 2 tentacles in the other spots on the field. And if they both end up front, then you just keep hitting Rake, and after a couple turns when it's charged up, it can just, one-shot them. A little harder to do in this game, but still really, really nice to have. I mean, this definitely can take out Clapper Claws in 2 shots, if anything. So, still classic, still good. Damage is much lower, so it's a little more fair. Rage also returns from the first game, and this is when I was alluding to moves start to have like conditions that he needs to fulfill to get the most out of his stuff, more so than other characters, right? Like Rake, you have to hit it 3 turns, before it's like maxed out, and then it's 7 to 9 damage mastered just over and over, which is good. Doesn't start that way. Rage, pretty okay base damage, like 5 to 7, that's Smite. But it can hit rank 3, like that's Crush, It has a nice juicy +2 damage, so we're getting into the era of no longer having just percentage additive damage. We're having actual flat numbers being added to it, which is important because flat numbers get scaled by the other percentages. So against a vulnerable target, that nice +2 damage, mastered +3. However, if they have block, which isn't the most common token, but if they do happen to have block, this also includes block plus, because they're technically the same in terms of what the game considers block. You lose damage, and you're still stressing yourself out. So if you swing into a block with Mastered Rage, it's 4 to 6 damage, which gets cut in half. It's 2 to 3 damage. It's not the best thing to do to give yourself 1 stress. Like, it's gonna happen, just because of how fights work out, but really it's not ideal, and it's just really bad when it actually happens. So gotta be aware of what you're fighting. Again, know when you're transforming and know what you're dealing with. Maul, this is new, and this kind of offsets the issue with Rage, as we just saw. Although it doesn't hit rank 4, it ignores block. It's bonus damage against blocking targets. And so this shifts around the other way to the point where like 9 to 11 conditional damage, and it ignores block, which means it should get rid of some block when it goes through it, because that's just how the ignore mechanic works, it's pretty good, right? That's pretty good. Especially when you think of things like pick to the face, break, you know. The only other type of efficiency you get for dealing with that kind of block at that level is like vulnerability hex, which just rips it all off and then puts, well, you know, stuff like that. So Maul, new move, but pretty good, especially when paired with rage. Slam, we got the Butcher's Circus Slam, where you can slam out of ring 4 finally. So you can use it in ring 4, no more transform and walk forward. One of the most feels bad turns ever. You can transform in ring 4 and then slam forward, get out of there, get a knockback, do some stress, some daze. And when it's mastered, you can remove dodge. So if you hit like the 50-50 or the 25%, you can peel off all the other dodge, which... Actually, no, it ignores dodge. I forgot about that. So you can just go through it, knock some off. That's actually good, right? That's much better. So slam is not something you press all the time. Like, it's not something you want to make a dance team around, although you can if you really wanted to. When you do need it, it's pretty good. So depends on the fight. Instinct, another new ability. You can only use it up front, and this changes a bit depending on the path. So for Wanderer, this is kind of like his mantra in a way. On Wanderer, Instinct hits anything on the opponent's side of the field. It pulls them, it gives them vulnerable, and more importantly, it removes riposte. This can do nothing else. You know, if all the other stuff fails, unfortunate as it may be, the fact that it pulls off riposte is freaking great. So you can set up a crit. Looking at you, Vestal, with Consecration of Light upgraded because you give crit tokens, or if you have some other way to generate crits, which is pretty rare, the blood, for instance, then not only is your vulnerable more likely to stick because it penetrates 20% resist, you can either get a daze, or if it's mastered, you can get a stun. So if you can feed this guy crit or just, you know, get a crit out of nowhere, then it's really heavily in your favor. Something to note also, does no damage unmastered. When you master it, it gets 2 to 3 damage, so it can at least ping death armor. Again, not something you're going to press all the time. Might be better with certain teams. It's also kind of weird to go into beast form and support someone, but I guess he has that, so it's cool. As far as a Wanderer team goes, I'd probably run it like this. Like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of Iker and Instinct. You know, you can swap into if you really need to, but we're going to look at Ravager, because Ravager is just the thing to do until Hellion gets changed, and you can run something like this with Howling End, Iron Swan, right? So that'll help out. And then we have Jester. Jester, pretty good with Abomination in the first game, still pretty good with him here. And since Abomination kind of wants to be in a specific spot, you can run like this setup here, where you have the dance moves, you have Ballad, you have Encore. So you can at least keep people in position, and pushing people forward and giving them strength and stuff like that is very nice, especially when Abomination can throw out combos to help Hellion if she's doing Wicked Hack, or double vulns, stuns, all that. Really nice synergy there. And the final one is Vestal. You can put whatever path on this, depending on what you're getting into. I didn't realize this was a name team. Still new to the Abomination name teams, but we're running the Gestal, and it's primarily just to, you know, get some nice buffs, a little bit of reach. So you can run something akin to this, right? Just so you have access to some dot removal, a little bit of reach, some buffs, later on some stress healing. But you also have Jester for stress healing, so you don't have to master Sanctuary. You can even take it off and put something else if you want to. But I would say these 4 are probably the core, and then whatever else you want there. And this lets you do pretty much whatever you want to with Abomination. It's safe. It is a little slow on damage, but, you know, it's got a lot of recovery. That's what Jessel's always been good at, is just surviving. And yeah, it should be good. You know, it can handle most stuff here. Unchained, this is the closest thing to human Abomination that you're going to get. puts him in the back line. For the most part, Manacles, he can only use it in the back instead of the front, and Backlash, still can't use it in 4, but those get made different from the path. Beast Bile becomes like an AoE, just hit the entire team spit, and it lowers dot res for everything. Like, this is a pretty okay move. It doesn't do on hit damage, but like that's still pretty good. Something that immediately comes to mind is Flagellant. I'm just gonna fill this in real quick, because Flagellant has Necrosis. So depending on who goes first in what order, you can have Abomination spit on the entire team, and then you can hit Necrosis like right after. And that is not bad. That is not a bad couple turns. You know, that's a little bit of blight damage, and then you AoE the entire team. It doesn't hurt Flag, it actually heals them, which is nice. So there's that immediate synergy. I'm just telling you now, even though I'm not going to suggest it here in a minute with the team. But it is there, and it's good. With the other stuff on Unchained here, so like I said, we have Manacles, almost the same, except now you can lower stun res and combo. This is good for the Crusaders, the Man-at-Arms of the world that like to stun off combo. Backlash heals stress against combo targets, which he shouldn't need. Honestly, he's not like all of his stuff is mostly in human form, so you don't really need to transform that much, but it's there. Interesting thing though is this gets some pretty solid bonus damage against blighted targets. Having +2 or +3 when it's upgraded, and being able to heal stress and all that, this is a pretty loaded move. So if you have someone else that's faster, a little bit faster, Grave Robber, Plague Doctor, items, whatever, just hit something with blight and then just backlash it right away, can be really good. Of note though, Backlash moves you back 1 space. Manacles moves you up 1 space. So you can kind of do your own weird self-dancing thing, because Manacles doesn't pull anymore, so it's like you chain them and then pull yourself forward, I guess, and like backlash and push yourself off. I don't know. So you got this 1-2 dance here if you need to, but I don't know how great Manacles is for that dancing, although this upgrade's monstrous. Look at this, 3 to 6 to 5 to 8. That's a jump. That's pretty good, all things considered. But yeah, so if you want to set up blight for him and spam backlash, you can put him up front and do this. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do and have him move around, then have someone else, you know, move him back, like Juster or whatever. So there's a lot of plays to be done here, a lot of flexibility, and it's mostly because of backlash. But yeah, so having Beast Bile hit the entire enemy team, lower dot res, and it does stress him out, but this sets up like every other damage over time focused character in the entire game, and it hits everything, so you don't have to worry about positioning. You know, the debuff might not hit the person you want at the time you want, or the enemy, but still not bad at all. Ichor does not change, so I don't care too much about it, although there is something about like Manacles and Ichor if you really want to. Absolution gets pretty interesting. It targets adjacent allies instead of him. It heals some HP and gives them regen, and then it heals 1 stress. And you have 2 uses. When you upgrade it, it hits himself, and it does everything as it did, and you get 1 extra use. So this is a really interesting one, because now he has like some support move, and since it's adjacent allies, you don't want to stick him in 4. It's very easy to stick him in 4 and, you know, use all the stuff here for the human side, but you don't need to do that. Ideally, you want 3 or even 2, depending on what you're trying to use, but 3 is definitely the best spot. Slam changes where it breaks guard and moves forward. The damage is pretty good. Doesn't skip dodge anymore and all that, so it's not bad. It moves forward. Transform, though, actually, I forgot about this. So Transform on this path actually moves him back when he transforms back. So you can kind of consider using Transform if he gets too far up ahead. And, you know, you can use your other normal skills like Rake And Rage if you want to. Maul, still the same. Slam, if you want to transform, slam, and then transform back, you know, do a bunch of jumping around, that's fine too. And the final thing, though, is Instinct. So if the enemy has Blight, this pings them for damage, so this can check death armor, can get through tokens, all that, you know, or can mitigate, interfere with tokens, which is really nice. And since they have Blight, you also can apply Vulnerable, and if you crit them, it applies Combo. The upgraded version, also kind of crazy, so you get to remove block, so your Vuln has a more or a better chance of sticking. And Instinct, in terms of what it's doing here, is pretty cool. Especially if you like Beast Bile, transform Instinct, like that is something you can do if you really want to. But I would also not really depend on that. Like I would only really try and lean into Instinct if I was doing Necrosis specifically, because a lot of damage over time doesn't do great on-hit damage, but if you have everything blighted already and you can vulnerable most of it, and flank and hit Necrosis for like 12 damage after, that's a good turn. So don't sleep on it. And for an Unchained build here, and in terms of mastering stuff, could be Absolution first. That's a pretty good mastery target because there's no HP threshold, right? This just gives other people regeneration and heals stress, which is good. Beast Bile sets everyone up and also has a bit of extra damage, but really it's kind of looking like Backlash is one of your best targets, if not the best target, just because if you can keep him where he needs to be, again, Jester, great at this, or just any dance team where someone can move behind him, even though it's not as common as moving forward, then this is 7 to 9 damage just over and over, right? That's a really good turn, especially if they have Blight on them. So, as far as the team goes, we're looking at something Blight heavy, so we have Alchemist, of course. Cause of Death, interesting, we'll talk about that in a sec. The next one is Venom Drop, which this can be Flagellant, this can be Exanimate right here, and it's still good. The reason I'm picking Grave Robber is because I have Flag in another team and I want to show off Grave Robber. So, with that in mind, what's interesting with Grave Robber is that normally you Shadow Fade in order to not only get the stealth but also the res piercing. And that's a really good opener for some Venom Drop teams. I made a video on a team where it looked like this with Exanimate, so turn 1 you Shadow Fade, since she's way faster than these two, and then just everything starts rolling the next turn, all the Blight and stuff, and you can Necrosis. But we're not doing that this time. And so, what you can do with Grave Robber, since she doesn't need to go into stealth to get the res pierce, you don't get the bonus damage, but it's okay. You can just start chucking flashing daggers right away. And so if you're sticking Beast Bile and all that, it's good. And something also of note is that if you can go into stealth, then you get this bonus Blight here for both of these. And you can still run Lunge and Shadow Fade to fix it if you need to, but it's not really 100% necessary. Another way you can run something like this is to Shadow Fade turn 1, for instance, and since she's way faster, you'll set up the situation again. Maybe Plague Doctor goes first and hits a Noxious Blast, and then you can Backlash, and then move backwards. And then you have this, and everyone's got their buffs, so still pretty good there. Grave Robber we already talked about, so this is the loadout I was looking at. For Barristan, Man-at-Arms, this is the pretty standard, simple Wanderer loadout if you want to just be effective, have guard, do damage, all that. You can switch stuff around, like if you want more taunt or more block, you can put on Standfast. So you got options. You can also run the strategic withdrawal combo, right, where you can heal yourself off Death's Door and then crush them when it's mastered and just heal 53% of your life, because why not? So you got options there. And Plague Doctor, so she is Alchemist. Your fifth slot is flexible, so you can run this 4. You could run Ounce at the beginning, is pretty good. I don't recommend it later just because of Ordainment resist penetration, Flaming Ash, you want to kill stuff, but Plague Grenade does have the 1-turn cooldown, which is slowing it down for sure. Emboldening, probably not. Disso, maybe not. Mag Rain's usually the good 5th, but also this is a time to consider Cause of Death. And the reason I'm saying this is because I actually did a run last week where I was running a bleed team with Cause of Death. I was running Surgeon, and I was surprised how often this actually was incredibly relevant. It's not just the front-loaded damage, although that is obviously the most important thing. You can drop stuff to Death's Door, obviously, like size 2s. This just demolishes the large enemies. Bosses, of course, really good on that. But it got to the point where I was actually throwing this out just anytime I stuck a Blight. Like if Grave Robber, for instance, with Mastered flashing here, crits and sticks all the Blight, it's 25 damage in Blight. You can immediately Cause of Death that for 25 damage. If they don't have Death Armor, they're gone. So there's some really interesting burst potential here with that. And it even helps get set up in a better manner with Backlash. So you can Blight whatever you're trying to Blight, Backlash, get this massive damage, push PD into the front or into rank 3, and then hit something with Cause of Death. And that's going to take, you know, full turn, depending on speed, or like a 1 turn in the next turn a little bit to get off. But like that's an option you have, and I think it's pretty fun. So this is still the Blight Cleave team, just a different face in it, and still good. I would definitely give that a try. I liked it. Next up is Fiend. This is one of the 2 transformation paths. So people were speculating he's probably going to get 1 human form, maybe 1 beast form path. He actually got 2 beast form paths. The first is Fiend. And all Fiend does, it's got that whole flavor text about capitalizing bleed at great personal cost. It's still mostly the same. He's still stressing himself out 1 or 2 points. But yes, this is the Bleed Abomination. It's much like the Cavalrine. It is actually not a myth. And so with Rake, as we look at the first one here, get some ramping bleed damage instead. Rage. It's all Rage in a sec. Let's start with Transform actually though. Transform here, when you shift, you go up 3 speed like before. If you have over 4 stress, you get Bleed Res Piercing. This is at all times, which is cool. And then you stress out your allies. It's a lot higher chance than the other forms, and you can't get rid of the 2nd point potential from the stress on other people. But everything here is great. You still get the regeneration and the stress heal. So Beast form, again, still really good. Is this worth mastering, you know, as early as the other transformations? Probably not, because all you really get is a little bit lower stress chance for other people getting it, and you get 10% more bleed res, but you do get a smaller cooldown, so that's still good to have. But I'm not usually in a rush to upgrade this one. And so yeah, Rake hits the same 2 targets, gets ramping bleed damage instead of having just bonus on hit damage. And you give yourself 2 stress instead of 1, but this isn't as big a deal as you think. For 1, you want high stress to get the bleed pen. 2, Rage exists. Rage, unmastered, is actually not that unassuming. 6 to 9 hits pretty hard. If the target survives, you get 2 stress. If you kill it, you get 2. Pretty fair, right? So you're thinking people are bleeding down, low HP, I snipe them with this, and then boom, I heal some stress. Mastered. This move gets a ton of damage. +2, +3. And not Execute 1, which we know is not the greatest. This is Execute 2, which we know is like the sweet spot for Execute. Execute 2 when the target is bleeding on a move that can do 8 to 12 damage. And you can juice this up with tokens and whatnot. So once this is mastered, your stress almost never really matters, because they don't have to be bleeding for you to kill them with this, right? And get the stress heal. So being able to just hit this once or twice, get a couple kills, you know, and lower your stress in between doing everything else, is actually kind of crazy. Maul, I am a little weirded out by just because it's straight up better bleed out. I mean, yeah, he gets T-stress, but Hellion wins herself, and the targeting's more restrictive, so there's a lot of damage here. And it's interesting, too, because it's so much damage, but at the same time, Rage is such a potent ability that you really don't care too much about hitting this. Like, this is better for, like, really high HP enemies, bosses, stuff like that. But, I mean, Rage sniping stuff on the road is great. So yeah, that's all it does. It hits hard, and it bleeds. Instinct. If the target's bleeding, you shuffle that target, and send them anywhere on the map, and gain on hit, heal 1 stress, and then when it's mastered, does a little more damage, because it does on-hit damage, and you can potentially heal a 2nd stress for hitting someone. This move isn't as great as it may seem, because obviously, you know, it can heal some stress, it does damage, so it can snipe stuff, but it's competing against Rage. So Rage is usually the better choice, especially if the target's bleeding. The other thing, bleed is... One of the issues with bleed and bleed teams is that a lot of the bleeding attacks hit the front. Sometimes the third, like if it bleeds, but outside of Caltrops' Bounty Hunter, you're not hitting rank 4 outside of like an item. So Instinct, most of the time, is probably hitting 2 units, which is still good. But it's not as great as it seems on paper. The only thing that might pull this out into being super good is if you have like Aspirant Occultist and you hit Anamnesis. So if you hit Anamnesis right away, and then hit this and stick some bleeds, and then Instinct, that's pretty cool, because now you have like another way to cleave down an enemy team. So for Fiend, I like this. I was running this a lot when I was testing it, and that's what I'm using footage from also, but we're bringing Scourge Flag just because we haven't seen him yet, and he's our healer, he's up front, and, you know, he's just chilling, so we have... Wait, I left him on Exanimate, excuse me. So Scourge right here, I thought something was wrong, but yeah, so... Got Scourge Punish, Acid Rain just to spread damage over time around, Deathless, definitely the reason you take Scourge, because it can heal quite a bit. More and more dumbest ability in the game, and he has it, and then Undying to help also heal more stress. You can, if you want to, swap this out for something like Endure, but this is usually good enough. Highwayman shows up as Yellow Hand. We have Open Vein, Pistol Shot for some reach, Dual Advance to help keep the team in position and hit those bleeding riposts. We have Grape Shot if we do want to stack it with Rake, which, as you see here, the bonus bleed received can be really good, so you can just pump out Grape Shots, and then A-Bomb starts stacking up bleeds very fast, which is really nice. And then Take Aim, of course. You can swap in Highway Robbery for the fights that you needed. So. The final one I wanted something interesting and different. I don't suggest Virtuoso that much, but this is actually a pretty decent Virtuoso. Using Virtuoso, we have access to Razor's Wit and Fade, so we can go back and forth. Don't need to run both of these. You can swap one or both of these out if you really want to, but the important ones are Battle Ballad because of the strength and potential crits and moving forward, and then also Inspiring Tune because the Encore buff of giving stress res is really nice, and then Encore itself. So when the team starts getting pretty stressed out, which is going to happen, you can start off a fight, or, you know, a couple turns in, you can hit Inspiring Tune and then hit Encore after, and you get this nice stress resist effect. Even though Abomination does have the penetration against bleed resist with 4 stress or more, you don't really need that to function. It's only in rare cases where you need that kind of push through, especially with bleed. Like, there aren't many things that get super high bleed res if it's not outright immunity, compared to like burn, blight, things like that. So having the stress doesn't matter too much, but since he does stress himself out a lot, you will have time to hit Inspiring Tune, and then if you want to Encore right away, you can do that and hit everyone with stress res, or you can try and slip in a Battle Ballad, which is also definitely worth doing. And so having that at your disposal. You know, if people ever get pushed out of position, or you can use Duelist Advance, you know, and move up. And when you're ready to transform, because you have access to things like Manacles, Beast Bile, and all that, when you're ready to transform, you can push him back up with Jester. And if you Encord, and you're able to get the stress resist from Inspiring Tune, he can transform, and your other teammates can have a chance of resisting the transform stress, and Abomination has a chance of resisting the own stress, or his own stress that he generates while using his abilities here, and kind of takes away the need for instinct. But with that in mind, that's honestly pretty cool. Like, when I was doing testing, it is 33% mastered, so even at that point, you know, you attack on average 3 times, you're going to block 2 stress, you know, and you only take 4, and then you're also talking about someone that can, whenever he wants to, transform back and then immediately absolution. So he can always drop 5 stress whenever the heck he needs to. So it's a really interesting combo. It's a little clunky if the turn order gets messed up by speed rolls and whatnot, but it's fun. I was having a lot of fun, and it felt pretty good as a team. The final path makes me really just think they're trolling. Like, how can they not be? Because from the first trailer of Abomination, everyone was making the Morbius jokes, and now we have a path called Moribund, which is kind of spelled in a similar way. It's got some of the same letters, and this is going to be called Morbius. It's just, it's inescapable. It's going to be called Morbius till the end of time. So we have the Morbius path, which is another beast form path, but this one has a little bit more utility compared to the other beast form stuff. Fiend wanted to have some extra stress in order to get the bleed pen and stuff like that. Moribund wants the extra stress to function. So having nothing changed by the human skills, this is one where transform is like your first target for mastery. Might be the first in too, like your first point goes into this, just because it does get a little bit better because of the horror. And it seems kind of weird, you give yourself horror, but you have to look at the rest of these moves where every time he hits them, he's healing stress. But he needs stress to perform these moves. So he gets 4 by transforming. If he's attacking, he's healing it. You want it high because then he gets all of these buffs alongside it, right? So he can double buff off Rake if he has extra stress, 10% per point. Rage gets bonus crit per stress, so if you have, since it's a bonus 10, you have like 4 or 5 stress, you can transform and Rage immediately, and that's plus 40% because there's no native crit rate. So, right, big, massive move. Maul, I would say, oh, let's just looking back at here too at Rage. The on crit, you get block and taunt. That's actually pretty good because that's what a higher likelihood of him getting hits and getting more stress, so kind of evens out. Maul kind of hedges into meme territory just because, you know, singular weaken token isn't bad. Healing 2 stress is fine. The reach is pretty good, but like you still have rage, which is going to hit harder in every single scenario. Upgraded, you get vulnerable, which is nice, and I know everyone's looking at that giant red text of instant kill per stress point. That is very cool and fun. It is not the reason you should be hitting this move. You should be fishing for instant kills, as fun as it would be. You still can, I'm not going to stop you, but I personally wouldn't do that. Reason is it's only 1 or 2% per stress, and having 1 point, 2 points of stress, 5 points of stress, right? The percentage is still very, very small. It's not as bad as Murder Weapon, because you have to crit, and then it's a chance, but like, you know, still not the greatest. And then Slam does guard an ally ahead of him, and moves forward, knocks back, heals stress. So this one's still okay. The damage got lowered a little bit, I think, so it's not like as good. But I'd say Slam and Maul are kind of the odd ones here. Like, I don't find myself pressing them too much. Maul does set up, like with the tokens, if you're trying to go like a little more utility, it does set up the vulnerable and stuff. It's also funny to try and put tokens on an enemy that you instantly kill anyway. but I guess you don't care if you instantly kill them. So yeah, slam can break guard, gives them block. Sorry, it doesn't break guard, it guards an ally. You know, gives them block and heals stress. Instinct. Unmastered, not bad. This is like your stress refuel, so you give yourself 4 instantly by pressing this. And it copies positive tokens. There can be a lot of positive tokens on the enemies, and you can copy various ones. However, when it's mastered, it steals them, which is kind of crazy. So there's no threshold in terms of you needing stress to use this. You can transform, be at 0 stress, and hit this. And being able to steal all the positives off them is actually crazy. So for instance, you know, enemy like the captain does all hands on deck or something like that. You can just yoink all of them. You hit everything, which is wow. Right? So by itself, not a lot of damage coming out of this character. Like, you get the extra damage on Rake. The other 2 moves are relatively tame in terms of damage output. Rage is pretty good on crit. But we need damage. So this is almost a pay-to-win comp. We bring in the Instructress Duelist. The other characters don't honestly matter that much. Like, having... Like, she is the stress healer, but also... You know, you can kind of slot in whatever, like a Vestal, Plague Doctor, Flagellant, if you want to. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can drop in for healing, stress healing, Crusader, Man-at-Arms, Leopard, to just soak everything. Like, a lot of good stuff going on there. The reason we're taking Instructress specifically, if you never played the path, is because of this move. Again, this does something honestly forgettable on like all the other paths, but on this one specifically, she gives a buff where they get 10% damage per point of stress. So now we're looking at a character that can just instantly get up to like 60% crit or something on a move that also has 60% damage. That starts to get really good. If you want to help mitigate or manage or increase whatever the stress with Instructress also, if you're in defensive stance instead of aggressive, you can give him 3 stress and he gets an extra turn. So just juice him up to like 8 stress, and then he can hit, you know, do a bunch of damage with rage, and then hit again, take off another 2 stress, and he's down to 4 or whatever, 4, 5, 3, right? So there's just a ton of synergy here. Like, Instructress always wants some kind of like hyper carry unit where she's just dumping her buffs into, and they're the one doing the damage. But this is the best target by far for it right now, because he's the only person that can generate that much stress on himself constantly. So this will be a favorite for people, I think. Ruthless Instruction is the other one that she gets with this path, where depending on her stance, she can heal stress on herself, allies, which is really nice, or even Abomination if he needs it, or give them more stress and aggressive, and then give them a crit token. So very easy setup is to put her in rank 3, master Touche, press it, hit something, do a little bit of damage, go into aggressive, and then just hit again, give them stress, hit Ruthless Instruction, also give them stress and a crit token, and that's a lot of damage. This doesn't have to be Touche, for instance. This could be really anything else. Like, if you have again mastered, you can open with Disengage, you know, and just have Feint. You just need to be able to you need a way to be able to flip your stance and get one on turn 1, so you can meditate and hit stuff, but you want aggressive, right? So you can flesh if you can figure out a dance team to like pull her back to rank 3 where she needs to be, or root her in place, whatever. But I think Touche is the easiest to pull off. That's why I suggest it. So master Touche, hit them, start doing stuff. You can also take prep. So you can use prep, get into the stance, the aggressive stance, and then use these, then feint out of it. Or you can meditate and then get, you know, riposte and dodge plus and all that. So Sahar really likes Morbius with Instructress. So as far as the rest of the team, you know, you have a stress healer relatively consistently here. You can also run like Crusader or Man-at-Arms. You have Duelist, you're going to have Crusader too, so that's why I don't mind putting them together, the DLC team. And then just run any healer. You can just throw Plague Doctor in the back of this. It doesn't matter, because you're going to have a little bit of trouble hitting rank 4. So you kind of want to do something like that, but also if you want to make sure that you can hit rank 4 and have reach and all that, you can run, you know, like Ravager again. You can run some kind of Flagellants, you know, and just dot the back line. You have something like this, so... really crazy stuff you can pull off with this one, and I think most of it's going to come from these two. Like, by itself, Morbius doesn't seem like that insane of a path, but having her with it just dials it up to 11. Looking at Abomination's Trinkets, Imperfect Antidotes doesn't seem that great. Block's not the most common enemy token. Like, Evangelists get it, the Cannon gets it, but the Cannon's immune to blights. The Tangle Soldiers have it, you know, the Sacrificial has it in the Sprawl, and then in the Shroud, sometimes the Captain can hand out block or whatever, but I say all these things, it's actually not as common as you would think outside of a cultist fight. So, block and having res piercing is nice. I mean, that's a lot of res piercing, but it's not amazing. And as far as transforming into beast form goes, admittedly, I have not found this trinket while I was playing, so I don't actually know what the random effects are. If I had to guess, I'm going to say if it's not just random tokens that can happen, it'll be stuff like horror, random damage over time, maybe debuffs like a speed debuff. It could either just be something simple in terms of a random outcome. They don't have to be negative, they can be positive possibly, or it's going to have its own pool of things that it pulls from instead of like being something closer to like true entropy where it can just grab a bunch of stuff. The other thing about gain 1 hit, 1 blight for 3 turns, that's not a big downside. You know, it actually sticks, it's bad, but like it's not that big a deal. But in terms of like what this trinket can do and the blight and stuff like that, the blight pen, I personally don't think it's that good, unless the random effects are actually just insane. Forced Confession. When moving, Abomination gets crit by, or increases crit by 1% for 1 battle. Apply on crit when moving, 1 damage for 5 rounds. So this is kind of like the Unchained trinket, I guess, where you're moving back and forth and like you're pushing and pulling enemies and they take the debuff or whatever. And then if an enemy moves you, you get comboed, which is bad, but not as dangerous as it immediately seems, because some enemies that move you to set combo, like Exemplar, are going to set combo anyway. Enemies that otherwise might set combo may not use it, you know, so it's not the biggest downside. I guess that's why it's guaranteed. So, probably thinking to use Crockpet with this right away, but honestly, having 1% crits for movement and all that, like, most road fights or non-boss battles, like a resistance encounter, they last about 4 turns. You either win by turn 4, I gotta make a video on this too, the 4-turn rule, but you either win by like turn 4 or you're so ahead by turn 4 that it doesn't matter. So it's like, on average, this trinket, if you're moving a lot, it's gonna be like 3 crit. And if you crit them, you get that debuff. So really, this isn't the most powerful thing. If it's a long fight and there's a fair bit of movement, like Harvest Child, you know, that boss likes to move a lot, and you can snipe a crit token onto it, you know, then you can do a ton of damage with that. Like, each one of these is 10 damage, because it's 2 damage per turn, because it moves twice a turn, you know, if you get it first. So, interesting stuff, but not the best. The Silver Lock. If the target is comboed, you have 100% res piercing against them. Not bad if you want the movement to stick, if you're looking for that, especially like manacles into backlash, so you get like the stun and they move, you know, guaranteed. Absolution, removing 1 negative token and combo, that's good for any Abomination patch. Just being able to get rid of a negative token and remove combo is fantastic. And then turn end in beast form, a chance of 1 stress. I would say this is the most usable trinket, and the downside is the easiest to mitigate. Because most of the time when you're running Abomination, if you're transforming, you're running a stress healer. Most of the time, he is able to deal with his own stress anyway. You might have to shift out of beast form preemptively. But if it's something like Morbius, then yeah, he's just working off the whole time anyway. Alright, y'all, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. If you found any other cool teams and strategies with Abomination. And just let us know what you're thinking. And again, if you want to join the community or support the channel, check the box below with all of the great links. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.